Okay, before we begin, are there any outstanding questions or concerns about assignments or anything?
For the debate thing last week, there was like an assignment for it on Blackboard. You're just gonna grade that for what we did in the debate, right?
What was that on Blackboard that you saw?
Yeah, there was like this assignment for debate, but I didn't put anything in it because it was we did it like in class.
Right. Um, I believe that was simply to indicate whether or not you participated.
Oh, so
So
we had to.
anyone that marks that
Oh,
gets credit, and you can mark it late. That's okay.
okay. Thank you.
Yep, thanks. Anything else? Okay, I hope you're doing all right on your midterms. I know that this is the time of midterms for a lot of you. Hope you're doing well. All right, so today's lecture is on the topic of consciousness. Let me share screen. This is a new microphone. Does it work better or worse than last week?
I think it works better.
Okay, great. Thanks. Okay, so consciousness. Also, I wanted to better answer a student's question. Last week, a student asked me during lecture whether LSD in particular was addictive or not, and I incorrectly answered that it's not addictive. I should not have answered that way. Everything can be addictive on some level. And here, this graph I present here ranges from 0 to a maximum of dependence. And it shows that, it shows all these different kinds of drugs and how they rank compared to each other on this graph of dependence or addictiveness. So it's not the case that hallucinogens as a whole class of drugs is completely non-addictive. All all of them have their different levels of addiction compared to each other and to other drugs. As you can see from the graph, um, these drugs that are more or less hallucinogens down here, I mean, they're not all hallucinogens, some of them are not, but they tend to be lower than sedatives and stimulants, which are in turn lower than these really high addictive, more addictive elements, heroin being the most addictive. Anyway, that's just a recap on last week and a better answer to one student's question last week that I was not, that I realized I did not answer well. Okay. Or any questions about that? Okay. What is consciousness? Now I changed the layout of the text on the slide, but it's not fundamentally different from the version that we have on Blackboard now. So what is consciousness? It's awareness of internal and external stimuli is one kind of definition. External stimuli, things like seeing light, feeling warmth, hearing a friend's voice. These are things that enter your your consciousness through your senses. And there's internal awareness, which is your thoughts, emotions, and feelings. Things like pain and hunger and sleepiness, you might call those sensory stimuli, or you might call them internal stimuli. It's up to you how you classify feelings, whether feelings are if you consider feelings to be sensory or emotional. I mean,
Sorry, I'm not exactly sure, but I don't think this is on Blackboard yet.
okay, let me check. Thank you. I thought I put it up there, but let me check. Okay. So I was saying that it's a little tough to know where to draw the line between emotions and feelings. But things like pain and hunger and sleepiness are usually considered not emotional, whereas emotions are, you know what they are. And thoughts are not one of the five senses, but they are considered uh, another kind of sensory stimuli in Buddhist thought or philosophy or psychology, which I think is really neat, because it just fits well with this lecture on consciousness being yet another kind of input into our awareness, these thoughts, emotions, feelings, whether they're physical or mental. So often we are not completely aware of our surroundings or behaviors, even when we're fully awake. For instance, have you ever daydreamed while walking or driving or doing anything? And have you still been able to perform your activity even though your mind was not focused on what you're doing, but it was focused on what you're daydreaming about? How did that affect your performance of your behavior? And were you surprised, or do you ever get surprised that you're able to accomplish your day-to-day behaviors even when you're not thinking about them? Is that surprising to you? And then that may invite you to ask the question, do you actually need consciousness to accomplish these things that you're doing while your brain is wandering, while your mind is wandering to other topics? We can think about, for example, you might be in the process of going onto Blackboard and downloading slides, and while you're doing that, you might think about something else, and yet you're still going on Blackboard and downloading the slides, so you can do one thing and think about another thing at the same time. How is that possible? So I'd like to hear your thoughts. Try typing what you think in the chat box. Add some thoughts and discussion to share with the class. And I have a video to show you here. So yeah, I'll just go to the video now. Okay, so the hard questions of consciousness. David Chalmers, he's a well-known researcher in the field of consciousness studies. He advocated calling or defining this consciousness problem, which he called the hard problem of consciousness, is our inability to physically account for consciousness, to our inability to explain why we have this thing called the subjective experience of consciousness. And he also defines it in terms of qualia. Qualia, that means the quality that we experience when we talk about being conscious. Another way to say it is the subjective experience. So how do we explain how we have this thing called this how do we explain that we have subjective consciousness? How do we explain subjective consciousness? It's a very difficult question. It's called the hard problem. I'm sure there's many hard problems in psychology, but only one of them gets the name the hard problem. And I think that it's right to refer to that as the problem of consciousness, explaining why we have something that is subjective but not objective. We can't objectively account for it yet, still. Not fully, anyway. John Searle encourages us to continue studying consciousness, even though it's the hard problem. He says, you can have objective claims about subjective phenomena. So even though consciousness is entirely subjective, and subjective is usually beyond the scope of science, but John Searle reminds us or encourages us, saying, it may be subjective, but we can study it objectively by making objective claims about this subjective phenomenon. Now I have a couple more videos to show you. First one is, how can you know that you are knowing? Followed by, who is this you that we talk about when we're saying that you know something? And following that, I'll show you a website that outline a Wikipedia page that invites us to continue questioning how knowing is even possible. What kind of assumptions must we make when we talk about knowing anything at all? And I have here some further questions for you to think about. I don't think that we're going to be able to answer all of these questions thoroughly today, but these are just things for you to think about. They're important questions to ponder. How do parts and functions of the brain come together to produce our synthesized subjective experience of the world? For example, we can see a yellow flower and we can smell it. We can see its shape, its color, texture, smell, feel. All of these experiences are entering our mind independently of one another, activating independent portions of the brain. And yet we perceive all of them as describing a single entity, a single phenomenon. So something in our brain is able to tie all of these sensory modalities together into a coherent perception of a single thing out there in the world. How's that possible? How's that done? That's related to the questions that we're asking here today. Is this a purely human trait, consciousness? Or do all animals share it? Do plants share it?
I think there was like experiment with animals. I think it's one from my dev psychology where certain animals were shown themselves and they were painted like parts of their face and body, and they were given a mirror. And if they look at the mirror and they see a change and they react to the change, that's knowing things, and that's knowing that the creature in the reflection is you. It's like some sort of way to find out that you have some objective perception of yourself.
You're
Turns out,
right.
I think one of the animals that could see themselves was monkeys, I believe, and some cases it was some certain birds, but
Yes.
mostly monkey-like creatures.
Yes, that's right. What you're talking about is a kind of study of self-perception or self-awareness.
Yeah,
It's a mirror test. I think that's what it's called, the mirror test. Uh, yeah, I'm not sure if we're getting to that in this course, but it's an interesting and important area of research. The question is, which animals have self-awareness, and can we prove it with experimental uh, apparati? Um, like putting a painted dot or a sticker on an animal's face or body, and then presenting them with a mirror and seeing if they will scratch off or mess with the dot that was painted on their body. If they recognize themselves in the mirror as a mirror image, in other words, as they become aware of them, uh, if they have awareness of themselves in that mirror image, they should try to scratch off that mark. But if they don't recognize the mirror images themselves, then they wouldn't. And the results of these studies show that certain animals do have self-awareness, recognizing their mirror image as actually their own body, and some don't. Very interesting line of work. Thank you. Um, okay, so I'll let's see. So I was asking these questions. Is it a purely human trait, or what distinguishes it from other species' consciousness? How do I know that my experience is the same as yours? These are interesting questions. Now let me jump to the videos that I had prepared. Okay. Um, Next, I'd like to break you up into breakout groups and let you discuss with one another uh, what you what are your views on consciousness and how it is created or supported or perseveres. Um, yeah, so I'm going to break you up into groups of 5 or 6 now. And if you have a live human, like a person group already in person, you can just maybe, I don't know if it's easy to exit the classroom and then rejoin.
yep.
I'm going to give you, huh?
That's usually what we do.
Yeah, okay, great. So I'm going to give you 8 minutes. So, well, yeah, yeah, okay. So come back at 1:48. All right.
We basically kind of discussed like the meaning of consciousness and its relation to like the perception of reality. And to sum it up, we kind of just assume that it really doesn't matter what we perceive to be real or how we perceive it. I recounted a story about like how I messed around with some guy because he watched the movie Matrix and he searched up this exact phenomenon of like how our brains doesn't accurately represent the world, and I just messed around with him. But the basic line of that story was, it really doesn't matter if the world isn't how we perceive it. If all of us share the same perceptions, all of us share the same sort of reality, with quotes again, it doesn't matter if it's wrong, false, or not. It
Well
won't,
said.
it really won't affect your life. You know, I mean, because the world is already kind of a scary place. There's so many things, things you can worry about, and it's better just to accept it rather than make it dictate your life. You know,
Yes.
because our body already innately knows it. There's some theories how our own esteem is just created to kind of warn out the fact that all of us know we're gonna die. It's okay to live your life the way you want to live it, and you shouldn't worry about this sort of stuff because in the end it won't change no matter how much you're scared of it. The fact of the matter is it's not going to change. It's
Well
that
said.
it's the only answer in the test. You might not like it, but it's there, you know.
I like what you said about sharing perception. It
Mhm.
doesn't matter if it's true or false. What matters is that it is shared,
Yeah. If we all
right?
agree that water is wet, wait, you know, this flower is yellow, it doesn't it's close enough. It's close enough to what reality is. That's fine.
Yes, it's functional.
It's functional. That's
Thank you. Good comments. Anyone else? Recap the points that you discussed in your groups.
Our group kind of have the similar points to what Josh Josh's group has talked about. So like we thought that consciousness is about our awareness of both the internal world, like our emotions, thoughts, feelings, something like that, and the external world, like what's going on around us. And um, we also thought that when it comes to what is real or what is not, is this world created by some advanced technologies or something like that, or is it the real universe that we understand? It doesn't matter because uh, when we describe the word consciousness, we feel like it's just a theme and it's a definition that we created to explain this word. So it
Very
doesn't
good.
matter if we perceive the real thing or not for our consciousness, something like that.
Very good. Good thoughts. If consciousness is all that we can use to know things, then that includes the word consciousness. The definition of consciousness is included in those things that we can know with consciousness. So if consciousness is defining consciousness, it's necessarily limited to that which which we can be conscious of. So I think that's captured in what your group was discussing. At least it's related. So, great points. Thank you. Any groups? Any other groups or comments?
Well, our group just discussed that we might have a consciousness when like the environment surrounding us like motivate our interest. So like we tend to able to remember what's happening surround us because of their motivated like it motivates our interest, something like that.
Mm-hmm. I think I missed one word. When multiple things are coming into our consciousness at the same time, are we able to attend to all of them?
I guess no.
Are we able to integrate them all into our perception, this thing called waking reality? Yeah, good. Any can I hear from another group or two? Who's gonna speak? Maybe no one else. Okay. All right. Great thoughts. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Okay. Jumping back to the lecture now. States of consciousness. One popular way of describing consciousness is on a spectrum ranging from asleep to awake. This is not the only model of consciousness. This is just one popular way of simplifying or conceptualizing consciousness. So in this kind of spectrum, sleep is at one end and wide awake at the other end. Sleep is low levels of physical activity and reduced sensory awareness. So there's not a whole lot of information that is, information is still entering consciousness, but it's not registering. It's not making it to the level of consciousness. It's like it's getting into consciousness, but only at the very low end of the spectrum. So when you're sleeping, do you think that you could hear your name when it is spoken? Can you hear someone call your name when you're sleeping?
I think if we have a deep sleep, we might not hear that, I guess.
I agree. Whereas light sleep, maybe so, right?
Yeah.
And some people would sleep so deeply that they couldn't hear their name, and other people, even in their deep sleep, would still be able to hear their own name or something. They might be able to wake up from deep sleep.
Um,
Yeah.
I have a question. Like, how would you know if you heard your own name, like while you sleep?
You would remember it because when you hear something, it enters into something called an auditory loop, which is like working memory. It's a short-term memory store where you can hold information automatically, like a 2-second tape reel where you can replay it over and over if you want. So if you heard it and decided to wake up, then you would still be able to remember what you heard. Did I answer your question?
Yep, thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. Wakefulness is a high level of sensory awareness. It's about, this is the state that we have our thoughts and our behaviors. Other states that we could place between sleep and wakefulness include daydreaming, drug intoxication, meditative states, hypnotic states, sleep-deprived states. And as a laboratory activity at the end of class, I'll ask you to see if you can put all of these states into a model of sorts. And it doesn't have to be a spectrum from sleep to wakefulness, but it could be any kind of model. All right. Seems like I'm missing some slides here. Okay, thank you. All right, here we go. All right. Let me just double check everything here. All right. So here are some other models of consciousness. We have here on the left Freud's model. You may or may not have seen it before, where consciousness is like an iceberg. And we have our conscious level of awareness right here above the surface of the water, which includes our thoughts and perceptions. And then underneath the surface, there's the subconscious level with memories and stored knowledge. And then beneath that, there's deeper levels: fears, violent motives, unacceptable sexual desires, irrational wishes, immoral urges, shameful experiences, selfish needs. Okay, so that's one model of consciousness. This is a very well-known one because it's advanced by Sigmund Freud and has guided our understanding of consciousness for many decades. We also have other models, such as this 4 states of consciousness, which is ranging from going down from the bottom up to the top here with ego and fear-driven levels toward the bottom, and trust and love levels, motivations up toward the top. And so we have this development, if we can advance beyond ego into love, we have life happening to me, then life happens by me, then life happens through me, and then life happens as me as you progress through your development of these states of, well, they're called states of consciousness, but I would call them perspectives. And then here we have something called the 8-circuit model of consciousness, in which we start at the top end of the pyramid instead of at the bottom. And as we advance, we develop down to these deeper levels of consciousness, you might say. So we have at the top basics and nurturing. These represent our basic feelings and needs that we start off in life with, and next to each one or underneath each one is the drugs that might be taken to mimic or experience those basic levels of consciousness or basic needs and states of consciousness at our earlier stages, and then going through to our later development. So we have dominant or submissive states, which could be, basic and nurturing states, which we could achieve through heroin, dominant and submissive through alcohol, mental mapping and time bending through stimulants, love making and morals through entactogens. And then I don't know what this break here is, but this says psychic, mystical, enlightened, and psychedelic states of mind. I see that that's kind of marking, like, from going here forward into stages 5, 6, 7, and 8, there's more and more psychic, mystical, and enlightened psychedelic states of mind. These include being blissful and conscious of the body. This doesn't have to be in, you don't have to take substances to achieve these states. This is just the substance equivalent, or approximation with substances, but it's the state of being blissful and conscious of the body. And then there's telepath. These are kind of hypothetical states: telepathic and communication and re-understanding reality, life as a whole or all as one, and then quantum consciousness or beyond space-time. These are hypothetical or theoretical states of this model. All right, I'm going to move on to the next slide. Here we have a graph outlining awareness on the y-axis, awareness of the environment, greater awareness of self. And then on the y-axis, on the x-axis is levels of arousal. So most of our normal kinds of consciousness are on this diagonal gradient, ranging from coma at one end to hyper alertness and mind expansion states up at the top. Here we have in the middle of this diagonal, we have loss of recall, stage 1, and then awareness, stage 2, deep sleep, stage 3, and then anesthesia, stage 4. These are going toward coma and toward absolute non-awareness and non-arousal. I'm not certain why we have this loss of recall here. It seems like loss of recall belongs deeper down, like light sleep. And anyway, you can see REM here as this extension of high, somewhat low arousal because your body is paralyzed, but greater awareness. So anyway, this is just one kind of model. We have something called locked-in syndrome, where people are where they are aware, so they're high awareness of their environment, and they are aroused, but they cannot move their body. Anyway, it's just one interesting kind of graph. It's not one that I particularly buy. I don't think that it's really perfectly well thought out how these things all fit into this graph, but it's just one conceptualization. Any questions about this graph or the previous slide? Okay. This is a rather shorter lecture compared to my other lectures, but we could give you time for a break if you want a break time now. Do you want a break?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Let's have maybe a shorter break. How about well, no, let's just do our regular break so I don't confuse you about break time. So 10-minute break. Come back at 2:18 and we'll start lecture from here. I'm going to go on with the lecture now. Sleep deprivation should be something that you are familiar with as a college student. Not that this is a good thing, but it is a typical reality. If you are not sleep deprived and are avoiding sleep deprivation during your university experience, I applaud you, and that's a great thing. We should strive for that. Sleep debt is not something that we should really brag about. It's something that we suffer with. If you fall asleep very easily, such as when you're moving, when you stop moving, when you're watching TV or commuting, you may have sleep debt. This is a very common phenomenon, but not a desirable one. Some people have difficulty staying awake. This creates a high risk for driving or operating heavy machinery or something like that. It's like being intoxicated with a drug, like a sedative, because it does incline you to cut off, reduce, eliminate conscious awareness of stimuli. Since the advent of the electric light bulb, sleep has declined. So in our electric era, starting in I don't know when, but seems like about 100 years or more, we have the electric light to guide our human civilization, encouraging us to be more productive and conquer the nighttime hours, but it comes with the cost of conquering ourselves and our sleep and our health. So sleep deprivation affects cognitive and motor functions like alcohol does, and like other sedatives do. Impaired ability to maintain attention and make decisions and recall long-term memories. These become more severe detriments as we increase our sleep debt. When we finally do get a chance to sleep deeply and sleep well, we enter slow wave sleep, particularly because slow wave sleep or deep sleep is, it seems like, is the most essential portion of sleep, so that when we are sleep deprived and then we finally do get to sleep, our bodies enter that deep sleep rapidly and our bodies stay, or our brain stays in that deep sleep for a disproportionate amount of time, a greater proportion of time, in order to attempt to compensate for the missed deep sleep of prior nights. I should also mention that deep sleep is the particular kind of sleep that we get particularly in the earlier portion of the night. So when we skip or sleep, when we sleep later than usual, we may particularly cut into deep sleep, which means that we're going to need more deep sleep in our next sleep that we get in the subsequent night. Anyway, so we increase when we get more deep sleep, when we achieve that stage of sleep that we need, then we increase our capacity for creative thinking, language learning, inferential judgment, and many more things. I would say learning in general is improved. Performance in new tasks is improved when we get deep sleep. This aids in our memory consolidation and skill learning, skill development, many things that we do with our brains. So deep sleep and sleep in general is very important for good, healthy cognitive functioning, as well as for
Sir,
health in general. Yes.
is sleep debt the same as like narcolepsy?
Sleep debt is the same as sleep deprivation.
What
Now,
about like the thing I said, narcolepsy?
narcolepsy, that's a great question. Narcolepsy, I don't know. I don't know enough about narcolepsy to know what causes it. I don't think that science has a really good answer, or maybe I just don't know. Sleep narcolepsy, I believe, is a genetic anomaly. I don't know what causes it besides genes. I don't know what environmental I don't know what kind of causes besides genes, but narcolepsy is this weird thing where people drop from awake down into stage 4 sleep, not even going through the stages, stage 1, 2, 3, which is going deeper, deeper, deeper. It's where people just drop from awake to all the way down to stage 4, like that. I don't know if there are environmental causes that can explain this, but it seems to be some kind of weird anomaly that I don't think there's a great understanding of or explanation about. So thanks for that question. Now going back to ordinary sleep debt and sleep deprivation, here are the negative consequences of that. So first, we can talk about irritability, cognitive impairment, memory lapses or loss, impaired moral judgment, severe yawning, hallucinations, symptoms similar to ADHD. All of these are cognitive, conscious repercussions of sleep debt. Then there are physiological repercussions. These include impaired immune function. So you're more likely to get sick, or you're more likely to be susceptible to illness, to get sick if you were battling it, or you were, yeah, it just compromises your immune system. That's a big thing. Then there's the risk of type 2 diabetes, because prolonged sleep deprivation, this is not just one day, this is like months, weeks, months, maybe years, because of the demands of your lifestyle, of your job, because of bad sleeping habits. This elevates your risk of type 2 diabetes. Then there's increased heart rate variability. Actually, that seems like a good thing. As I've heard, heart rate variability is a good thing. So I'm not really sure about that one. And then there's risk of heart disease. There's increased reaction time, decreased accuracy. There's tremors and aches, and others include growth suppression, risk of obesity. That goes hand in hand with the risk of type 2 diabetes. And then there's decreased temperature, where your metabolism seems to slow down. It doesn't give you adequate body heat. So this is a sign of your body going into severe inability to cope with prolonged stress. It goes back to the model of susceptibility, stages of dealing with stress. When you get beyond a certain stage, you're now at an exhaustion stage of dealing with stress, where you're no longer able to maintain adequate body temperature even. So yeah, sleep is important. The next slide is on hypnosis, because I'm now going on to another state of consciousness. Hypnosis is a state of suggestibility. In previous years of teaching, I like to bring up some YouTube videos of people being hypnotized or trying to hypnotize other people. You can watch those on your own time if you like. They can be interesting. I think that hypnosis is a very interesting area of study and practice, but I don't know how I feel about advocating for people to try hypnosis, to hypnotize others, or to be hypnotized. And the problem I see with hypnosis is this state of suggestibility, where you give your mind you put your mind into a state of suggestibility to a hypnotist who you trust to suggest things to your unconscious, which then filters back up to your conscious state later on. I'm not entirely sure how it works. It's all kind of theoretical. I don't know how well understood consciousness is from a scientific standpoint, and that partly has to do with the problem of consciousness itself being so difficult to study in a concrete way. But anyway, so it's a state of suggestibility and internal focus of attention with minimal attention given to external stimuli, usually with clear memories of the hypnotic experience and control of one's own behavior. So you usually retain some level of control of your own experience, your own behaviors, but you give up some of your control to the one who's hypnotizing you. The clinician tries to alter the thoughts and perceptions of the patient. Hypnotizability is a trait. Most people are somewhat hypnotizable. So if I asked you in this class, are you hypnotizable? We should see that about maybe 70% of the class could claim that they are somewhat hypnotizable, with about maybe somewhere between 15 to 30% of the class saying that they are more immune or very immune to being hypnotized. That's not necessarily a good or bad thing. It's just the distribution of that trait in the population. I say it's a good thing on the one hand, and it's a bad thing on the other hand, because being able to self-hypnotize might be advantageous, or being able to be hypnotized by a clinician might be advantageous to help you out dealing with any kind of particular issues that you're interested in overcoming, such as the ones I'll describe next. Next point 3, 4 elements appear consistent in hypnotizing participants. So these are 4 kind of steps or attributes of hypnotizing. We have guided to focus, being guided to focus on one thing is, so when we're trying to hypnotize someone or be hypnotized, we want to have our focus on one thing. That could be the hypnotist's words or a ticking watch. Then second is being made comfortable, being directed to be in a relaxed or steep and sleepy state. Sleepiness is advantageous because we are more easily hypnotized when our awareness is suppressed. So we try to reduce awareness by suggestion of sleepiness, which is possible for people who are more suggestible and is more difficult for people who are less suggestible. So already we see that suggestibility is a trait that is required for being hypnotized. Step 3, being told to be open to the process of hypnosis. Again, this is a suggestible thing. To be told to be open to something, that works with people who are suggestible and open to suggestions. But it doesn't work so well on people who are more closed to suggestions or less closed to, or less open to being less suggestible in general. Continuing with that third sub-bullet, trust the hypnotist and let go. And then step 4, encourage the use of one's own imagination, or encourage the use of the patient's imagination, because active imagination is instrumental and helpful, maybe vital, for getting people to slip into that state, which we call hypnosis. So hypnosis has been recognized and practiced for a long time, since perhaps before, but maybe since the man called Mesmer. That was his last name, Mesmer. He developed and introduced this phenomenon of mesmerizing people. I don't remember when he was around. This might be 1700s or 1800s, but he was the first who mesmerized entire audiences with his techniques of hypnosis. And from him and from those techniques, we developed and honed in on this ability, so that psychologists have been practicing hypnosis for a while. Not many, not most, only some minority of hypnotists or psychologists practice hypnotism, and some small percentage of people practice hypnotism. They may or may not be psychologists, but hypnotism has been practiced as a form of therapy and help to now I'm on the 4th bullet point. It's at least somewhat effective for pain, depression, anxiety, smoking cessation, and weight loss. I've seen it particularly used in reference to smoking cessation and weight loss. So that is, the application of an unusual state of consciousness, hypnosis, which is this state of mind where our mind is somewhat similar to the state of meditation, somewhat similar with sleep, maybe one of the earlier stages of sleep. So it's a low level of arousal. And it's very suggestible. That means we are allowing our mental state to be affected very greatly, influenced very greatly by that hypnotist who is acting as a coach or a leader in a practice that gets you into this state. So it's all interesting, but I don't know how much I would encourage myself or others to become susceptible to others' suggestions. So you really have to trust the person that trust them as a hypnotist, or trust yourself as a hypnotizer. I see that there's a lot of potential for abuse, I think, but I don't hear about abuse very much. That's a good thing. Next slide on hypnosis. A state of suggestibility and internal focus of attention with minimal attention given to external stimuli, usually with clear memories of the hypnotic experience and control of their own behaviors. The clinician tries to alter the thoughts and perceptions of the patient. Oh, I read that already. Sorry. The next slide on meditation. Meditation is similar but very different to the state of hypnosis or sleep. Quite different. We could say that it's a world apart. And yet there are common overlapping features. So meditation is the act of focusing on a single target, such as the breath or a repeated sound, to increase awareness of the moment. The central feature of meditation is clearing the mind in order to achieve a state of relaxed awareness and focus. EEG recordings can show the change in the state of consciousness of experienced meditators, but they're not able to reflect or detect much change in novice or beginner meditators. So there is something very witnessable, observable, objective in the mind, in the brain behavior, in the brain waves, in the brain activation of experienced meditators, which shows that the act of practicing meditation for weeks, months, years, according to a practice or a habit or strategy or technique, whatever it is, but engaging in that practice for a long time, psychology studies have shown, I think it's safe to say thousands of times now, have shown evidence, objective evidence, that there's something really going on when we practice meditation, especially for a long time. So these changes in the state of consciousness are evidenced or supported with these objective measures such as EEG and fMRI. These meditative techniques have roots in religious practices, and they are now being used in alternative medicines. Like hypnosis, meditation is also shows promise in stress management, sleep quality, treatments of mood and anxiety disorders, and pain management. So what I'm saying is, although meditation is very different than hypnosis, but the two are now being introduced into modern psychotherapy and other kinds of therapies to deal with modern problems like sleep deprivation and anxiety disorders. So now I'm going to show you a video on this very topic. I thought that what was remarkable about that was particularly that pain, which is visible in an fMRI as the intensity or the amount of activation across various areas of the brain. That intensity goes down in that woman's case. That's remarkable. She's doing that with her brain. She is able to affect the intensity of her pain by her own conscious will. That's incredible. And it basically illustrates or captures how amazing the brain is, or how amazing the mind is. I hope you would agree. And we could see similar kinds of remarkable studies with like a lot of things that the brain can do, quite remarkable when we allow, well, never mind. Okay, I'm gonna go on to the next slide. All right, that's the end of the lecture. Here is your media assignment. The link is also available on Blackboard. It's a YouTube video, so again, this is not just listen, it's watch and listen now. And today's lab assignment, I'm going to ask you to work in groups of 5 or 6 and turn in your lab assignments together. There's 2 parts. There's discuss the podcast of last week, answer these 3 questions, and then there's a second part. I want you to remain in the same group and turn in this second part for another point. So I'm collecting 2 assignments on 1 group submission. I want you to discuss and place appropriately in a diagram these states in a model of consciousness. Deep sleep, normal awake, daydreaming, meditative sleep, hypnotic sleep, sleep deprived, drunk, and your own conscious state, something of your own choosing. And I also want you to answer these 3 questions. How effectively could your left brain survive on its own? Your right brain? Which hemisphere contains a bodily sensory image? Which hemisphere supports rage? These are questions that you would answer if you were paying attention to the podcast. And then, are you 2 people or 1? Explain. All right, so I'm gonna put you into your groups, and then that is the end of lecture and the end of your assignments. Yes.
If we have like our own groups, can we leave the room?
Yes, definitely. All right, before you leave the room, are there any questions or thoughts that you'd like to share with the class?
Do we have to come back after the assignment?
No, you don't. This will be the end of the lecture.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other thoughts or comments? Okay.
How many person per group?
Sorry?
Like how many person per group?
5 or 6 people per group, if possible.
Okay.
Any others? Okay, we are ending class earlier than usual. I hope you don't mind. And your lab activity should probably take you somewhere between 10 to 20 minutes working in groups. Please have 1 member of your group submit for everyone. And please include all your group members' real names. That helps me. It's easier to grade with real names after all. Okay, that's it. I will break you into your groups, and then I will end lecture so you don't need to come back to the classroom. All right, good luck. Bye.